Good frigid January morning to you all. Great grace and peace and greetings from Tobermory. If it weren't for the cold temperatures outside, I wouldn't believe it was already January 21st. Time just seems to be zipping along. And it makes me think, in light of the scriptures for today, about a time not quite 40 years ago, but when my two sons, who are now 40 and 38, used to go to the Bob Hayward Y in London for swimming lessons. And I would take them down there, and it wasn't really a long enough lesson to leave them there and then come back, so I would wait. And when they got out of their class, it always took them just an age to get dressed and have their showers and find their way back out to the parking lot. So I spent a lot of time in the parking lot at the back of the Bob Hayward Y. But it was a good time because there was a fellow who had a wonderful garden at the back of the YMCA there. And he was very elderly. He was in his mid-90s when I got to know him. And one day he was planting, and I asked him, I said, "What are you planting?" And he said, "Oh, I'm planting asparagus." And then he proceeded to tell me that it would take 5 years before it bore fruit. And I thought, what a hopeful way of living, to plant asparagus at the age of 95. Planting for the future, for a future that you may not even see. And I think that's the spirit of the gospel for today, which is in Mark chapter 4. And I'm going to read verses 26 to 33. Jesus also said, "The kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground, and would sleep and rise night and day. And the seed would sprout and grow, he does not know how. The earth produces of itself, first the stalk, then the head, then the full grain in the head. But when the grain is ripe, at once he goes in with his sickle, because the harvest has come." He also said, "With what can we compare the kingdom of God? Or what parable will we use for it? It is like a mustard seed, which, when sown upon the ground, is the smallest of all the seeds on earth. Yet when it is sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all shrubs, and puts forth large branches so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade." With many such parables, Jesus spoke the word to them as they were able to hear it. This is the gospel of Christ. Thanks be to God. Well, yesterday, David Sykes, who's living, he and Gloria live in the wintertime down in Connecticut, sent me an email. Maybe it was because he needed a sign of hope. I don't know. I'll have to ask you about that, David. He sent me an email with a picture in it, a composite picture, which is remarkable, really, because they had to take the picture in pieces because this tree is in the middle of the forest. It's a composite picture of a sequoia tree in the Sequoia National Forest in California. And this tree is 247 feet tall, so you can't stand back from it and take a picture. What they did was they went up to the different levels of the tree and took pictures of a piece of it and then put all the pictures together. So you see this remarkable picture of the whole tree. It's 27 feet in diameter, and it's 3,200 years old, they estimate. So that the small seed from which it grew was planted before Isaiah, before Aristotle, before the time of Christ, 1,200 years before the time of Christ. Just a remarkable story, and a sign for me of hope and endurance. My sons are good and thoughtful men, and they love their children. I'd like to think that those small acts of love, waiting around in the parking lot outside the Bob Hayward Y, are bearing fruit in their lives, even fruit I don't even know about. So the gospel seems to be saying today, keep planting seeds of love in the world. Jesus likens the work of love in the world to a tiny seed that grows into a large tree, not a sequoia, but in the case of the gospel, a mustard tree. And often we'll plant and not live to see the results. So I'm grateful for some of what I see in the lives of my sons. But like the man who planted asparagus, there was another elderly farmer that I heard about. I think it was from a family member who looked at the oak trees that lined her driveway out at the farm and remarked how, I think it was her elderly grandfather, had planted acorns along the driveway, knowing that he would never see the results of his planting, but he planted anyway. Which is to say, our loving actions are not for us, and few things that are truly worthwhile come to fruition overnight. But the gospel wants to say, keep planting anyway. The prospects of the seeds of love that we plant are incredible, even immeasurable. May God bring you hope and encourage you to live in love. Be safe and be well, my friends.